Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into the origins and evolution of the American government. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also the host of this discussion. And here he is, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Agnes, and welcome to the of the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Here we are on Monday. It is the 13th day of February in the year 2017. We are live. This is a live broadcast after a week of being on the road. So I've looked forward to this. I've been compiling materials and for the 10 days or so since we've been together. And I've been looking forward to returning to the air and getting back into the to what has really become a passion for me is the opportunity to be with you on a regular basis here at the Virtual Center. So welcome to our program today. I want to invite you to share in the program as much as you can. And if you are inclined, please consider giving us a call and getting on the air and sharing your thoughts and your ideas, not only with me, but with our other listeners as well. Our phone number, if you'd like to do that, is area code 304-663-4676. 304-663-4676. If you'd like to drop me an email and share your thoughts one-on-one with me, I'd be honored to receive it. I will do the very best I can to do you justice and present your ideas, your thoughts on the air, provided we both agree that they are things that our other listeners ought to listen to. I'll do the very best I can to do the best I can to make your thoughts your own, and try not to do any editorializing on my own part for you, in your name. My email address is waobrien906 @gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN 906 @gmail.com. I do urge you to take a look at our Facebook page. If you are a regular user of Facebook, you know how easy it is. You just go to the home page, and in the search box at the top of the page, just type in the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution, and you'll be on our Facebook page. I've been putting an awful lot of links and points of view, opinion pieces, as you will, as postings on our Facebook page for a number of days. There were so many things going on and so many things to react to. I've got to tell you that I ran into a situation yesterday, Sunday, that I haven't run into before. And that is, like, I got tired of posting things on Facebook, and I couldn't believe it. That's the first time that ever happened. But I had an article that I was going to put the link on, but I'm very reluctant to put up a link unless I'm able to share with you a few things about it. If there's a reason that I think that you would appreciate as regular listeners of the Virtual Center, if I believe that you would appreciate a particular article or learn from a particular article, I make the decision to put it on Facebook, to post it. But I feel obliged to put a comment or two with it in order to explain to you why I thought you would like this article. In other words, I don't want you to think for a moment, because I have never done this and I never will, and that is posting an article on Facebook without reading it myself and making the decision. In other words, screening it on your behalf, in a sense, by saying this is one our listeners would really enjoy, or something like that. And then if I do that, I feel an obligation to at least tell you why I thought you would like that particular piece. And I did it Saturday, late Saturday and yesterday, about 4 or 5 times on different pieces on different subjects. And then I had this one piece, and I was going to put on there, and I just thought, I'm really kind of drained. I can't sit here and write another opinion piece. I've already written 4 this morning or something like that. So I didn't put it up there, and I'll tell you very honestly, it was an article on Melania Trump's lawsuit against the Daily Mail. And I never did post the article, and there are a number of articles on this particular thing. I think you could find it in a number of places. Many of you know that Melania Trump has filed a $150 million lawsuit against the Daily Mail for an article that it published in which it had alleged that not only before her marriage, not only was Melania Trump a member of a modeling agency, but that modeling agency also doubled as a high-class escort service. And based on that particular information, Melania has filed suit. She's filed a number of suits. One of them has already been settled for a significant amount. Part of the settlement is that the amount itself will not be revealed. But the author of the particular piece has written a public apology to her along with the settlement, because he really did proceed without doing the adequate research, and he did libel her, and he acknowledged that he did, and he apologized for it. But that didn't vitiate the suit, and he was forced to pay a significant amount to her. But the thing and the reason I'm saying this to you now is because this is in place of the posting that I really did want to put on Facebook. The thing that impressed me was the basis of her suit, as her attorney has explained it. And I thought this is particularly interesting in light of all of the allegations and questions about the variety of private holdings, business holdings, that the president has, and whether in fact, as a result, he's in conflict of interest trouble as far as the Constitution of the United States is concerned. We're going to get into that later today. But the basis of the case that Melania has filed is based on the tens of millions of dollars that she believed she would be able to earn as a result of being America's First Lady, the wife of the President of the United States. That she believed that position put her in an appropriate place to generate tens of millions of dollars in profit for various products and various engagements or agreements that she could make where she would use her name to endorse a particular product. In other words, being the wife of Donald Trump, once he got elected president, became a very positive money-making opportunity for Mrs. Trump. And the fact that this article appeared in the Daily Mail, she feels so libeled her that it jeopardized her earning potential. The founders would absolutely rotate in their graves over this. Because if you do, again, we're going to get into the issue of the emoluments clause later in today's program. But if you were at all aware of some of the concerns that the framers had about foreign influence on the new government, and how they were so afraid of foreign interference and foreign corruption, efforts to bribe and buy influence in the new American government, they were so concerned about that they included the issue of emoluments into the Constitution of the United States. I can say parenthetically, because I think it's important, that the emoluments clause, or a version of it, was also in the Articles of Confederation. This was not something new. This was an ongoing concern at the time of the founding, is that people would take advantage of the public offices of this new government and use their position to feather their own nests financially. This suit filed by Melania Trump is absolutely the most blatant case of that I've ever seen. It is absolutely incredible. I was going to put that on Facebook yesterday because I ran across an article. I can't even remember what the article was right now, about her suit and the ingredients of her suit. But what I wanted to do was post it because I wanted to draw people's attention specifically to the attorney's basis for the suit, for the allegations of liability. It's based on her earning potential as the wife of the President of the United States, which is exactly why the framers were so concerned about the issues of emoluments and why they put the clause in the Constitution and why they had already put it into the Articles of Confederation earlier. So, they were really concerned. This was not something, and there was very little debate on it. If you read through the Madison's notes on the convention, there wasn't that much said about the issue of emoluments because everybody pretty much agreed that it was a no-no and you had to do something to make sure it didn't happen. So that was one of the less contentious issues involved in the writing of the Constitution of the United States. The framers were in such general agreement on their concerns about emoluments. But and again, I don't have any issue at all with Melania filing a suit. And obviously there's some basis for it. She won one of the suits against a particular author of the article. But this $150 million suit that's still outstanding is against the Daily Mail itself. And that one has yet to be resolved. I don't have any concern with the issue of liability. It's one of the, it goes hand in hand with the idea of a free press. You have the right to say publicly what you want to say about public officials, but that doesn't excuse you from liability. And in this case, apparently there is definitely some liability. But the basis on which the financial harm that any litigant must demonstrate in court, if you're going to have a chance to win, if you're going to make your case in court, you have to be able to show that the offense for which you are suing personally harmed you. And the fact that the harm that she feels she experienced as a result of this article being published was a financial harm. It's very interesting because I didn't see, at least the article that I read didn't include anything about her reputation, her personal hurt, the fact that her character and her reputation had been, theoretically at least, that she felt that it had been slandered, but that didn't seem to be an issue nearly as much as the earning potential loss associated with it. So anyway, I wanted to bring that attention to you because it's not on Facebook, mainly because I just didn't seem to have the wherewithal to write it yesterday. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll mention it on the air, and that'll cover it. But anyway, here we are. We're on the 13th of February. Before we get into, I mentioned emoluments. I've got a number of issues that I want to deal with, but there are quite a few issues associated with this emoluments issue that I wanted to relate to. It's in the Constitution of the United States, and we'll get to it. In fact, I have a copy of the Constitution right here because I want to quote the particular clause in question to you. But before we do that, I wanted to make you aware, if you're not, and you may be, because our friend Bob Kincaid has been intricately involved in this whole thing. He shared with me several weeks ago that, and of course at that point, none of us could say anything because it wasn't public information yet. But several weeks ago, Bob made clear to me that that Bernie Sanders was going to come to southern West Virginia, and that there was the likelihood that he was going to schedule a town hall public meeting in McDowell County, which is very close to here in southern West Virginia. McDowell has the honor, if you can call it that, of being the poorest county in the poorest state in the Union. That means, for translation, for, effectively, that McDowell County is the poorest county per capita in the United States. It's among the highest in opiate drug addiction. Its economy is in shambles. It's non-existent. About a year and a half ago, the only significant employer in the county, which was Walmart, closed its store there. And so many of the people in McDowell County have been struggling for a long time. And the reason this is significant is because during the height of the coal boom in southern West Virginia, McDowell County was booming. The population was, I think there was about 125,000 people in McDowell County. I would bet that there probably aren't 30,000 in the county now. But there were 125,000 people in McDowell County during the height of the coal boom. A close friend of mine, a noted artist who grew up in McDowell County, who grew up in Welsh, which is the capital of McDowell County, the county seat, as you would have it. It's from McDowell, and he talked about growing up there and what it was like, and attending theater there. And many of the coal barons lived in the region there, and it was a booming community, thriving. And the arts were flourishing there. And they produced my friend Pete Ballard, who's one of the most accomplished artists and one of the nicest people I've ever known in my life. And so, much of what I know about McDowell County I've learned from Pete over the years, and conversations we've had over lunches and dinners over the years. I've known Pete for about 30 years. He's talked about his mom and his parents there and what life in McDowell County was like. And Pete taught at the North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem for a number of years. He retired from there several years ago. I don't know exactly how. Pete's right now in his mid-80s. And when he graduated from Concord University, where I taught for so many years, Pete graduated with a degree in literature and writing, and he wrote one of the most brilliant short stories that I'd ever read. I had no idea how beautifully Pete wrote. I know how he paints. He's one of the most accomplished artists I've ever come across, I've ever known personally. But he writes beautifully as well. And he wrote this short story about Welsh. During his younger years, he was about 8 or 10 years old at the time of the story. And he was talking about this artistic performance by this accomplished musician who was going to come to Welsh. And there was a horrendous snowstorm the night before the performance. And consequently, the turnout was nothing. The performance didn't even happen because there was so little turnout, so little people, so few people who could show up. But Pete went, and the artist was there. And Pete ended up having a one-on-one with the particular artist. I can't even remember his name. It was the most absolutely insightful, brilliant short story that I've read. And, I just think it speaks volumes not only about him, but about McDowell County, the county that he loves. And, one of the things that has pained me, and other than that, I don't have that much personal involvement with McDowell. But one of the things I do know from having lived here for as long as I have is that McDowell County has been the subject of a number of research grants that have been funded by the federal government and various agencies. Institutions of higher education, research universities, like West Virginia University, but not only West Virginia University. I would guess as well Virginia Tech, for example, which is very close to here, and others. But I know that millions of dollars in grants have been written about McDowell County, primarily advocating or promoting programs based on the research that is done about the people in McDowell County. And the fact of the matter is, one of the things that has become very clear to me is that over the years, millions of dollars in grant money has been allocated towards addressing many of the problems in McDowell County, but the fact of the matter is, nothing positive has been happening there. For the most part, the grants were awarded, and most of the money apparently stayed with the institutions who received the grants, because I haven't seen any impact on quality of life in McDowell County from any of these. So the people in McDowell County have been the subjects of all sorts of research grants, but never seemed to become the recipients of some of the largesse that one would assume goes with those. And so, it's been kind of McDowell County has been kind of a convenient opportunity for grant writers in this region for a significant period of time because of its existence there. You really increase your chances of getting funded if you can find a way to incorporate McDowell County into your proposal, because McDowell County is so well known for being in such horrendous need. What's the point? The point was that several weeks ago, Bob shared with me that MSNBC, Chris Hayes, his All In program on MSNBC, was scheduling a town hall meeting in McDowell, in Welsh, with Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders was going to come and meet with the people in Welsh and of McDowell County. That was scheduled weeks ago for today, for this morning. Friday night it was canceled. After all of those weeks, Friday night that meeting, that town hall was canceled. And the reasons for it were not very clear. But as the dust has settled some, it appears that public officials in West Virginia made the point on Friday that it was a violation of West Virginia code to conduct a political meeting of this kind in a National Guard armory. And on that basis, access to the armory was denied to MSNBC and Bernie Sanders at the last minute, when in fact hundreds of reservations to attend the meeting had already been taken. MSNBC and Bernie Sanders both have committed to coming back, to rescheduling the meeting and coming back. It didn't take too long to realize that something else was probably going on here. Because the reality is, referring to this town hall as a political meeting suggests that there's some sort of an election campaign going on. The fact of the matter is there isn't. We just had it. And we're quite far away from the next one, which will be 2018. ironically, and then the next presidential election, of course, in 2020. Only one candidate has filed for candidacy so far for the presidency in 2020, and that's Donald Trump. And apparently the rationale there was that in order to receive campaign finance money, candidacy papers had to have been filed. So basically, President Trump filed the papers for 2020 so that his campaign could receive these funds. And the piece I read suggested that even at this early point, close to $8 million in contributions has already been received into the Donald Trump re-election campaign fund for 2020. But other than that, I think people would be hard put to find any evidence that there's an election campaign going on. So that raises questions about whether, in fact, this is a political meeting at all. It depends on how you define political, of course. Bernie Sanders spoke in Charleston yesterday to a standing room only crowd. And Bernie Sanders himself made reference to the cancellation for this morning's town hall meeting in southern West Virginia in McDowell County. And so yesterday I posted on Facebook my reaction to what seemed to be going on here. What I pointed out, first of all, Bernie was a guest on Meet the Press yesterday from Burlington, Vermont, from his home. And in that interview with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, Bernie Sanders referred to the president, President Trump, as a pathological liar, as well as being delusional. Chuck Todd responded to that by saying to Bernie Sanders that this was pretty serious stuff. In other words, that was quite a thing to call the President of the United States. Fact of the matter is, what we have always known as political correctness is pretty much gone, and I think we've all appreciated that. We saw this happening during the campaign. Some of the things that happened during this campaign made it very clear that all the traditional rules of decorum and civility were being violated as a result of this campaign. These people were saying some horrendous things about each other. President Trump admitted that. If you remember in meetings after the election with Hillary Clinton, in one of them, Bernie Sanders made the point that she said some awful things about me and I said some awful things about her. It was the nature of the campaign. That's what politics has become, he said. Fact of the matter is, many people aren't worried or don't see any problem with civility going by the board. Some people believe that political correctness and civility are tantamount to being gutless and somewhat dishonest. They believe that in order to resolve problems, the first thing you got to do is be honest about them and define them, and in order to address them. And as long as you're worried about offending other people, you tend to be evasive, and the real issues never get out there, so therefore the real problems can't be resolved. There are many people who believe this. In some ways, I believe it also. The first thing you got to do is honestly be willing to exchange honest points of view if you're going to solve a particular problem. But then there's another side. And in my posting on Facebook, I cited Immanuel Kant, the philosopher Immanuel Kant. In 1784, at a conference, Kant delivered a paper at a philosophical conference in which he called civility between modern nations the hidden plan of nature. He felt that it was civility more than anything else that made negotiation and diplomacy between nations even possible. That the last thing you wanted to see in international affairs, Kant said, was this kind of brutal honesty. That it was a sense of decorum and tradition and principle with which people interacted with each other that made diplomacy possible. Kant went on and talked about the fact that it's civility that holds communities together. The fact of the matter is, he said, that if you're going to have a community, if you're going to have a society that can function, you've got to have people who are outwardly decent to each other. If you're going to ever engage in serious negotiation and dialogue. That kind of civility, Kant said then, is vital to maintaining community itself. It's the very essence of harmony in any society. The fact of the matter is, whichever side of that particular situation you come down on, whether you're glad political correctness is gone or whether you're worried a little bit because it's gone, it seemingly doesn't matter because it's gone. It seems like from where we are now, political correctness is more a term for historians than a societal reality. I read a piece in this morning's New York Times by a regular columnist, op-ed columnist, Charles Blau. And I'll be honest, I've been reading Charles Blau pretty regularly now for several months. Because Charles Blau is one of the op-ed columnists in the New York Times that it's taken me a little while to get to appreciate. But I've come around to doing just that. I find many of his columns insightful, and to be very honest with you, informative. I found that seemingly on a pretty regular basis, Charles Blau incorporates good information into the pieces he writes. It's not just opinion. He's not just sounding off on issues that concern him or that interest him. It's pretty evident that he's willing to do the kind of legwork necessary to dig out the facts on some of these issues. Consequently, I found valuable substance in a lot of Charles Blau's pieces. The same thing is true in this morning's piece. Charles Blau's piece in this morning's paper is about disruption, is about the variety of different ways and the extent to which Americans have been going in protesting the presidency of Donald Trump, even though it's just gone a little bit beyond 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, disruption has become a regular feature of the day-to-day news. Each weekend of the Trump presidency so far has featured major protest marches. And protests are happening in a variety of different places around the nation, in some cases around the world, the Women's March, for example. His subject is disruption. His theme, his thesis, is that in today's political world, disruption is necessary. His explanation for that is that sounding off and making a lot of noise has some value but little practical result. That something more substantive has to follow from that. I don't really have much of a problem with that, and especially the information, the recounting that Blau has done of the various examples of disruptive protests in the last several months, I find pretty informative. But one of the things that I also wanted to comment on was the tone. Blau is dealing in the tone of the times. If we ever wondered whether political correctness and civility was gone or not, if you read Blau's piece this morning, you'd have a pretty good idea that it's pretty well been filed away somewhere, and it doesn't exist. One paragraph I found particularly insightful and particularly informative about this point. Blau has already talked about some of the sycophants, the staff in President Trump's campaign. He's made reference to Kellyanne Conway and her QVC-like pitch for Ivanka Trump's product lines at Nordstrom's. I'm sure you've caught that on the news. The fact that President Trump tweeted about how horrible Nordstrom has been to his daughter Ivanka. And then one of the things that Trump makes the comment on in the article was that Ivanka's a good person. She's always pushed me to do the right thing. And so one question that occurs to you is, what does this say when the President of the United States acknowledges that in order to do the right thing, somebody has to push him? But be that as may, that's not the point. But the point was that Kellyanne Conway at the White House, in the media, told people to go out and buy Ivanka's stuff. It's available, readily available online, is what she said. And there are serious questions about that promotion by one of the president's key advisors. And then, of course, he's gone into Melania's suit. We've just talked about that. So as examples, he's used Melania's suit, he's used Kellyanne Conway's, and all the rest of them. He's talking about how these people are seemingly out to get rich from the political offices that they hold. And then Blau says the following: unethical is too kind a word for these classless cretins. Furthermore, Trump has nominated, and his Republican conspirators in the Senate have confirmed, a rogues gallery of some of the least qualified, most questionable appointees in recent memory. Aside from some of them being the fiercest critics of the very agencies they're charged with leading, some have also been accused of bigotry, plagiarism, insider training, and overall vacuousness, unquote. You can't be much more direct and much more blunt in political criticism than that, it seems to me. But, as I pointed out in my comment, the fact remains that Blau's article is about disruption. And one has to realize that disruption doesn't go very well with political correctness. But I think what we're seeing here is an illustration of the levels to which our political discourse has descended. I think the word descended is a good one. We've seen it go down to the level which makes many of us uncomfortable. It's gotten to the point where we don't even want our kids to witness some of these debates and some of these arguments because of some of the things that are being said and alleged. And of course, the most evident one is the tape of Mr. Trump years ago talking about women and talking about his position of power and what it enables him to do and all the rest of it. I mean, it just makes people extremely uncomfortable. And that seems to be the way that our discourse, or the level at which our discourse is going to operate. So what I've concluded, and again, I've got the link there for you to read the Blau article for yourself. What I've concluded is that Blau's article might be right in the right tone for today's political battles. But the reality is, I know, and I want to kind of suggest that you might keep in mind also, that our political republic, our republic, as it was founded, can't last when political dialogue is happening at this level. Our system is based on honest disagreement and exchange, on deliberation, negotiation, and compromise, on people accepting and willing to engage each other constructively in search of solutions to some of the major problems. As long as our political dialogue continues to function at a level and in a tone that we're seeing, the potential of our republic cannot be realized. And indeed, if we don't get about our business and find a way to fix this, I'm afraid that the republic as constructed can't survive. I've said that in a number of venues and in a number of different contexts, I know. But I believe this one to be as important as many of the others. I've said that, I know, about the idea of a second convention. I'm really worried about it. I've said it in terms of the gains, the one-party gains that are being made on the local level, and the degree to which intensive gerrymandering is going on at the state level, so that it's going to be very difficult for another party ever again to take back control. Our political representatives in Washington continue to talk about the fact that there will come a day when the other party will resume or retake power. But the fact of the matter is, the one that is in power now is doing everything it can to make sure that it doesn't lose power, at least not very easily. And so the fact of the matter is, power itself is becoming the principal objective for our entire political apparatus. Let me end this particular session, this particular topic, with a comment that I think is very telling and very significant in this. And that is that what the framers had in mind in the establishment of this republic was the ability to resolve problems in the interests of the citizens of this nation, and indeed, ultimately, throughout the world. They really believed that the best for the most people was possible in a republic based on these kinds of principles and these kinds of processes and assumptions. The purpose of politics, the purpose of elections, were to serve a civic benefit, a benefit for all citizens, not just power for the people who were successful in winning elections. Power was not to be an objective. Power was to be a means to solving problems for the benefit of people. There's no question that what we are witnessing now is a violation, a total violation of that entire political ethic. Politics is currently being operated for the benefit of those who are able to win. Power is the objective. The people have become the means toward the seizure of power, not the recipients for the benefits of power. The entire rationale for the nature of the republic has been reversed. And the dialogue, the level of civility, or lack of it, that seems to dominate our political discourse in this country seems to me to reflect confused, unethical, immoral objectives. No longer are our two parties debating different strategies in order to benefit most the people of this country. They pay lip service to it, but it's very obvious that the real issue is power itself. People are beginning to see this as never before, because what we're in now is a new administration that is much more willing to acknowledge its principal objectives. It seeks to couch them with terms like making America great again and other things. But the fact of the matter is, that is becoming clear as a means to acquiring power rather than the search for power being the means to benefit people, if that makes sense. I don't think the republic as it was conceived by the framers can long sustain politics operating at this level. I think it has to change. I think it has to change rapidly, quickly. In order for that to happen, I believe that the Democrats, maybe even more than Republicans, bear some responsibility for the solutions. Because in effect, they bear responsibility for the situation. Democrats abused their years in office. As we continue to go on further and further into the Trump presidency, we're beginning to see more and more evidence of the confusion and lack of direction and clarity of vision that Democratic leaders have. In effect, our Democratic leadership, it appears, has lost its vision, it's lost its direction, it's lost its way. It held power for so long that it seemingly lost touch with the people whose benefits were to be the objective of that power. People were willing to surrender power to Democrats because Democrats seemed to stand for and promise things which would be to the best interests of people. But over the years, it became clearer to more and more people that all of that, to many political leaders within the Democratic Party, was a cover, was an excuse, was the way you build a successful political campaign, but when you got in there, you didn't follow through. And so what we're seeing is as Democrats scurry around trying to come up with reasons why they lost the November elections by so much, and now only recently beginning to understand that they've been losing power in states for years, that the Republicans, well-funded, one by one have been taking power in state after state after state. And that this national election that just happened in November was merely the culmination of a process that had been underway for years. Democrats didn't see it. They didn't anticipate it. More important, they didn't seem to recognize that the very people they were being elected to serve were being, in large part, ignored. And the other party was moving in to seize the opportunities that Democratic leadership was presenting. In 2008, with the election of Barack Obama, the Democratic Party and the Democratic victory symbolized the public's seemingly unanimous desire for change. But change didn't happen. Now Democrats are promising already, 3 weeks into the Trump presidency, are already beginning to talk about change again. Why would anybody believe them? They talk change. But when we get to Washington, even though the National Democratic Party is a minority every place, in the House, in the Senate, in the White House, presumably on the court as well, how do the Democrats respond to the loss of power? With change? I would suggest that's not true. Look who the leadership of the Democratic Party is. The same leadership it was before. Nancy Pelosi is in her upper 70s. Schumer. Steny Hoyer, 76, I believe. Representative Congressman Cummings from South Carolina. I'm not criticizing them per se, but I'm saying the kinds of things that the Democratic Party needs to fix can't be fixed by the very people who created those problems. They can't see the solution. They didn't even see the discontent of the people when it was happening. Frank Bruni, in yesterday's New York Times, wrote an article, an op-ed piece, on whether, in fact, the Democrats are falling into Donald Trump's trap. It's a good piece. It talks about the lessons that seemingly the Democrats didn't learn as a result of the defeat in 2016. Bruni even raises the question, maybe they didn't lose badly enough. Maybe the lesson didn't sink in yet. But the fact of the matter is, they aren't behaving in ways that suggests that they learned what they needed to learn. Instead, they're operating, or seem to be operating, the same way they did during the campaign. And that is by focusing on their opposition rather than on themselves. One of the best lines I saw, there are 10 candidates currently vying for the head of the Democratic National Committee. And one after the other, Frank Bruni interviewed them all. Of the 10, he interviewed more than half. And he has some unbelievable things to say about them. And his major point is they don't seem to get it. They're floundering. They're in search of explanations, of answers. One of the candidates, Sally Brown, who's head of the Democratic Party in Idaho, told Frank Bruni, and this is a quote, "The Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton pretty much communicated what was bad about Trump, but failed to communicate what was great about Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party." They were more focusing on the opponent than on themselves. Tom Perez, who was Labor Secretary with President Obama, is one of the candidates for the Democratic National Committee head. And he said what voters heard from Clinton during the campaign was not, "I feel your pain." It was, "Vote for me because he's crazy." That's not a message, Perez says. Bruni points out these statistics. He said a recent poll indicated that 41% of Democrats were unfamiliar with Chuck Schumer. Only 29% of these Democrats were unfamiliar with Stephen Bannon, Trump's guru. They know more about their enemies than they do about their own agenda. They're not running for anything. They're running against it. I think what we saw here in West Virginia this weekend is proof positive that the Democratic leadership in West Virginia is guilty of the very same thing. Bernie Sanders won the Democratic primary in West Virginia hands down. Yet when the Democratic Party leadership went to the Philadelphia Democratic Convention in July, they reported a victory in West Virginia by Hillary Clinton. They wanted Hillary Clinton to be the Democratic nominee for president because they believed that Hillary Clinton could beat Donald Trump. The fact that the people of West Virginia voted differently and voted for Bernie Sanders, they tended to discard. They dismissed it. They ignored it. Their goal to win. Serve the people, forget it. I was a candidate in this past election here in West Virginia. We were told as candidates to fashion our campaign in tandem with the campaign for governor. We were to run on the issues of coal, on the extent to which coal jobs could be brought back. What we were not told to do, in fact, what we were told explicitly not to do, was run on the Democratic platform adopted early in the summer here in West Virginia by Democrats. The West Virginia Democratic platform was among the most liberal platforms in the entire country. 15-hour minimum wage, reliable, affordable broadband access for all, movement towards universal single-payer health insurance, health care, a ban on for-profit prisons, repeal of the concealed carry law, opposition to fracking and mountaintop removal, access to clean water, opposition to job-killing international trade agreements, an end to Citizens United for public funding of elections. But the party leadership in this state decided that it couldn't run on that platform, that it shouldn't run on that platform, that it had to run on a platform aimed in the direction of West Virginia's past, not its future. And the people spoke. The people objected. But did they learn? I would suggest that silencing Bernie Sanders and keeping him from coming to McDowell County this morning was an example of the fact that the Democratic Party leadership in West Virginia learned nothing from its defeat this past fall. I tried to run on this platform. I didn't realize the tidal wave of anger and frustration that I was running against. Whatever you think about the specific parts of this platform, it was a people platform. It put the Democratic Party in this state back in the same position that Roosevelt brought it in the 1930s with his New Deal. People's faith in government has to be restored. Government has to make the needs of its people its priority. For too long, we've concentrated on the desires and wants of the few at the expense of the many. What we've got to do is turn that around. Not do what the Republicans are doing and suggest that government is the problem and get them so they're running against government totally. but rather to realize that in any modern civilized society, government is a major requirement. It's a need. It's an asset. But its objectives and its direction must be clearly defined. And the people must make sure that that government is pursuing the objectives for which it was elected. And these leaders decided that they didn't want to run for those and support those objectives. Then fact is, damn it, they should have lost, and they did. Frank Bruni pointed out yesterday that the National Democratic Party leadership needs to learn the same things. Bernie Sanders will be back in West Virginia. Bernie Sanders will be back in McDowell County. He said in this morning's Washington Post, "We'll meet in McDowell County, West Virginia. If not in the Armory, then we'll meet in the streets, but we'll meet." Bernie said, "If anyone in West Virginia government thinks that I will be intimidated from going to McDowell County, West Virginia, to hold a town meeting, they're dead wrong. If they don't allow us to use the local armory, we'll find another building. If we can't find another building, we'll hold the meeting out in the streets. That town meeting will be held. Poverty in America will be discussed. Solutions will be found. I want people to see firsthand how poverty leads to terrible despair, and that in reality, how it is a death sentence for many. In McDowell County, one of the poorest areas in one of our poorest states, people are now living shorter lives than their parents did. Unemployment is sky high. Drug addiction is at an epidemic rate. Schools lack adequate funding. It's high time that we as a nation heard from the people who are impacted by this crisis and determine the best ways forward." That's the lesson that the Democrats nationally and locally need to learn. They didn't learn it in 2016. They better learn it by 2018 and 2020. They have to stand for something. You have to basically use government to the benefit of people, not to the benefit of the same interests that got us into trouble in the first place. Trump promised change. Trump promised to drain the swamp. We all see what's happening. Wall Street is ecstatic. President Trump announced that beginning today, he was going to begin removing dozens and dozens of Obama administration's regulations on business behavior, including Dodd-Frank. They're going to be easy to run against in 2016, but you can't just expect people's opposition to them to cause them to support you. You've got to stand for something. You've got to be in running for office because there's something you want to accomplish. And what you want to accomplish has to be to put the interests of people first. When Democrats do that, they'll rebound. Until they do, they remain primarily responsible for the lack of civility and for the low tones to which our politics have descended. I think we've gone beyond the top of the hour by quite a bit. We're 9 minutes after. We are going to pause and take a few-minute break because I need a few minutes to kind of retool here. But anyway, so please stay tuned. We're going to take a very short break. I know Agnes has some music she'll share with us during the intermission. We'll be right back with you here at the Virtual Center. I hope you'll stay tuned. Thank you.
We now return to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Here is your awesome host, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Agnes, thank you. I hope that our break was long enough for people to get a cold drink or walk around or light a cigarette or go to the restroom or whatever you needed to do. I needed a few moments to try to come down a little bit. I knew that one would get me fired up because I feel very, very strongly about that. I think it probably came across. I really, really believe I can remember a very extensive dialogue on email that I had with the chairman of the Democratic leadership in Charleston here in West Virginia. And it was at the beginning of the campaign, and we were talking exactly about this. And it was my position or my sense then that the Democratic Party here in West Virginia had really run away from its president, President Obama. When Republicans began to attack President Obama, when Trump began to raise the birthism issues, when it became very clear that President Obama was going to have difficulty getting much done because the determination among Republicans was to obstruct as much as possible, it was time for his Democratic supporters to step up. And they didn't. And the result was that many of the elements, many of the ingredients of the change that candidate Obama promised were never fulfilled, or were fulfilled only in part, or even worse, were fulfilled through executive orders because Congress wouldn't move. And now many of those executive orders are being reversed. I think, and again, I started to put together a segment, the Virtual Center. We might just do it.
Bill, we have Horst on the line.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Horst.
Hello?
How are you?
Hey, you hear me?
Yeah, I sure can. How you doing? You sound
terrific.
Great.
Great.
You sound great. We haven't talked since before the first of the year. Happy New Year.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I meant to. There were several points, along the road where I wanted to call in, before this happened, before that happened, and it all happened, and it didn't happen. So right.
I know.
But I'm here now. So happy New Year belatedly, and all the other stuff that.
Yeah.
And welcome to the new. American century, right?
Yeah. Oh my heavens! Tell me about it.
Yeah.
There's one of the things I'm going to do. I'm hoping to do it maybe one day this week. There's the New York Review of Books. You may, if you get time, you may want to take a look at it.
Okay.
But the New York Review of Books has included in its current edition a review of a book, and I haven't read. I haven't read the book itself, but it's a foreign policy book on empire, on American empire. And it features the debate during the late 19th and early 20th century over strategies for America's role internationally in the modern age. And the author is Stephen Kinzer. And the review is really provocative. And
have you talked about Kinzer before? Because I feel like I recognize that name.
I don't know. I did too, and I'm not sure that I did or not. But one of the things the reviewer points out, which I think is really attractive to me, is that Kinzer includes a lot of quotes, a lot of primary source materials to back up his point. And for me, getting my hands on that research is almost enough reason for me to get the book. So I thought I'd share what is in the review here on the program one day. And the fact of the matter is, the reviews in the New York Review of Books are so insightful and so chock full of good information that when you read them, you pretty much know whether this is a book you want to read or not, or whether the review itself is enough, if you know what I mean. And so I, in fact, I thought of you when I was reading it yesterday. I thought, oh, this is one that you might find interesting. The review is excellent. But anyway, it's Kinzer's book, and it's in the current edition of the New York Review of Books.
Okay.
So
no, I've looked into the New York Review in the past directly because of your recommendations. I think a couple 3 years ago. I'm not even really sure about that, but yeah. A number of publications you recommended, I've made a point to try to follow here and there.
But you can't follow them all because there's too many, But
no, they're really meaty. It borders on literary biography almost.
What I find myself doing is I go through phases. Suddenly I'll say, gee, I haven't looked at the New York Review of Books for a while, and then I'll look at it and I go crazy for about 3 weeks, and then and then I go on to something else. But anyway, it's great to hear. It really is great to hear from you.
Yeah, I hardly even know where to begin. I mean, like so much water has gone under the bridge, and also just the topics that you mentioned today. You've said so many things that we could probably spend a long time discussing back and forth.
There's quite a bit there, I know.
Yeah, I don't even know how to get started on that. I did want to ask you before I forgot, if you caught I sent you an email a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, I guess. And I sent it to you and Bob in tandem. I had completed I've been doing for the previous year. I just finished up a course in December, getting my an actual formal teaching English certification.
Right.
And I had to put together like a portfolio, including like classroom videos and stuff like that. And I thought, I got to the end of it, and I was like, you know what, I want to share this with Bob and Dr. Bill because
I did look at a couple of the videos. I remember.
Oh, cool, you got it. Okay, I didn't know if it came through or not because
I did.
In the original email I forgot to send the link, and I thought,
I really did. I really enjoyed the videos.
Terrific.
I never even thought to mention it, but. You really ought to be complimented for that is one heck of a presentation. That's quite an assignment. Wow. Really. There's a lot to it.
The portfolio, yeah.
My granddaughter is a senior in high school here, and she's been with us, staying with us on weekends now for the past year, and she goes to school in another county, so. But then on Friday we pick her up and bring her here, and she's involved. She's taking some singing lessons and trying to make some breakthroughs in the arts here. And anyway, she's doing a senior project, and she's been working on it every weekend for several weeks. And she completed the project just before we went to New England, right in late January. And it was made up. It was like it wasn't videos so much, but it was she had to put together a PowerPoint presentation on a particular topic, and the topic that she chose was quilting, and it needed to be something that would be 15 minutes, and she needs to make a 15 to 30 minute presentation to her class on the topic that she's researched. And anyway, I didn't even pay any attention to what she was working on over the weekend, except that she was using the computer at times when I wanted to use it. But when she finished it, she asked me if I'd come in and look at it, and I just thought it was incredible. And it's just the amount of work and the vision it takes to kind of put something that complicated together. That's what I thought about your program. I thought, my God, the combination of what you said, of the substance, and then these videos is pretty powerful.
Oh, well, that particular course steps you through the process pretty well. That was about a 6 month, compilation, a week here and a week there and stuff like that. The main thing I got that put together and I got to the end of it. And because I borrowed a family story of Bob's, as an introduction to the series, that's what got me thinking. It's like, you know what, it's one of those things you become aware of, like as a teacher, for instance, like, I have all these students and the relationship is fairly one-sided somehow, like it's a struggle for me to remember everybody's names, in a class, when you have several classes and stuff like that, or it can be. I don't have a problem with that. But then I thought, when you're on the radio, it's multiplied by thousands, in certain circumstances. And I thought, I've been, friends with Bob, on Facebook, and I've been following him for like the last 5-6 years, whatever it is, like on his particular, podcast, and then yours for like the last, I guess, 3 years, and we've got our own particular relationship, as it is. And I just thought, I got this thing put together. These guys don't even know what I look like.
Yeah.
or what it's like
that's one of the things I was going to comment on. Yeah.
Right, or what it's like to be in a room with me. So I thought this would be just a great op. I'm just going to throw a link over there. So I was curious if you got it or not, because like I said, I screwed up the original link in the first email, and so I didn't know if it came through. And
I did. I watched a couple of those videos, and I thought they were great.
Oh, terrific! Well, that's all. I'm not.
I appreciated knowing what you look like. That's great. That was great. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, you didn't look like the average citizen in Taiwan.
No, probably not.
Probably not.
Okay, so on to business anyway.
Okay,
so that's
sure.
something that's been on the back of my head for like the last couple of 3 times I've talked to you. So I just wanted to make sure that you got that.
Yeah, I did. It was great.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, okay. So today I have kind of a counterpoint to make to. You seem to make the statement just heading up into the break there that you hold Democrats largely responsible for the uncivilized tone and discourse in politics now. Is that how I understood you to be saying that?
No, I don't really. I think both parties are engaging in the politics. That is a separate issue. What I hold Democrats for is responsible for is their own defeat.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't.
I mean that's really because it seemed to me that there was all sorts of, and I probably didn't pick it up like I should have either. But this is kind of what they do. I mean, they had party leaders, and there were all sorts of signs and indications that I feel that Democrats were losing their way, that they were losing touch with the very people that they needed. I think that I can remember during the primaries that many of the points that Bernie Sanders was making about Hillary and her relations with Wall Street and the speaking fees that she was receiving and all of these were signs that the Democratic Party emphasis on priorities was different than the people theoretically that got them elected. And as I look back on it, I'm kind of saying, now it's becoming clear that the Republicans were able to move in and take advantage of these, and many traditional Democrats voted for Donald Trump, and because they were disillusioned and frustrated and angry and all the rest of it. And I'm kind of thinking that the Democratic Party leadership at some level should have picked up on some of this and tried to do something about it. And even now, after they've been defeated, they're still reluctant to face reality. And I think this move they made by keeping Bernie Sanders out of West Virginia is a classic example of it. I mean, I really believe it's kind of the way that West Virginia has been governed for the last century.
I think that might be an outlier because the Democratic Party in West Virginia is not exactly what you could call a Democratic Party.
No, it's not.
I mean, like Joe Manchin, for God's sake. I mean, he's like, Zell Miller retired, so someone had to step up and take that job, basically.
Yeah.
And there's always one guy who really doesn't belong in the party. Period. He's just there for whatever,
Yeah.
Bob has said this a number of times on his program. A Manchin never voted for a Democrat whose name wasn't Manchin, and that's basically what you're looking at there. Jim Justice, I don't know. He could have just as easily run as a Republican. I suppose he didn't have inroads to that party. My home is Oklahoma. It's essentially. I mean, it's actually not quite that bad. I mean, like we used to have. When I was growing up, we did actually have some strong Democrats, but they've been missing since the Gingrich Revolution. Basically, you haven't, except for one governor. who wasn't particularly, progressive, but the rest of the time we've had David Bourne, we've had Brad Henry, and that's the last that even David Bourne's son Dan Bourne was essentially a Republican. He was in fact worse in a lot of ways. So
yeah.
I understand. I feel the pain of being a red state Democrat. The state parties are they make you want to just give up party politics, period. But you're not given a choice. There's nothing else.
No. And in this case, right now, we're facing a situation where there has to be something else, and this is the only place right now that it can come from. I noticed that this weekend, when Bernie Sanders was on Meet the Press yesterday, the very first issue that Chuck Todd addressed were those people who were trying to get Bernie Sanders to take on the leadership of a third party, basically burying the Democrats and saying, we need a new progressive party. How about, there's a lot of people that want you to take it on. Chuck Todd asked Bernie Sanders whether he would, and he kind of dodged the question. He said, right now, my major focus is on doing what I can to help the Democrats recover and restore their power and all this stuff. So he kind of dodged the question a little bit. But anyway, so again, it's not the tone that I blame the Democrats for. It's the defeat itself. I don't know who to blame the tone. I mean, obviously, most people, blame Donald Trump for the tone. But, the fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter is it's been going down for quite a while, but it seems to most people it kind of hit bottom this time.
Well, I don't know if you caught it or not, but you linked the story to Charles Blow's New York Times article, I don't know, earlier today.
Right.
And I penned a response to it probably 4 or 5 hours ago. That was, my sense is that really, the whole civility thing went out the window again back during the Gingrich days, pretty much. That was the beginnings of it. But, the George Bush, the W. Bush administration, there was no civility there.
No, you're right. You're right.
They ran the operation like the only game in town. They steamrolled the Democrats. They did famous things like running sessions, and then when the Democrats got to speak, turning the lights off on the chambers and actually closing the doors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or holding secret meetings in a basement somewhere, not inviting the Democratic, representatives, to not even letting them know where votes were being held. And there was a famous anecdote where a Democrat actually found out where they were meeting, in the basement somewhere, and knocked on the door, tried to get in, and the door was answered, and an aide or whatever answered, said this meeting is only being attended to the coalition of the willing, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a very famous story.
Yeah.
They were back then. It was like what is it? I forgot the old TV, Our Gang or something like that. Like Little Rascals, like up in a treehouse, and if you're a Democrat, you're not allowed in. That's how they ran the government. That was back in 2000.
Yeah.
This is not new. This is not new. And they did a lot of this behavior was formed back in the mid 90s, back when, Trent Lott and what was the other guys? I forgot. Like those guys ran the the House and the Senate together.
Mm-hmm.
And they just ran it like no, it was an authoritarian sort of a situation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. What I think, Democratic voters, the reason why the Democratic establishment has so much trouble getting consensus and power behind them is because they're so spineless. They don't stand up in the face of this and really fight back like they should. I believe that's it. It's not a question of civility. The fact, to me, it's like they keep insisting on observing these rules of order, when it's clear that they're just getting stabbed in the gut every time that they leave themselves exposed to this. That the Republicans are not going to play that game, and they're going to take advantage of it every chance they get. We're going to see this play out with the filibuster rules pretty soon in the Senate. Wait and see.
I think you're right. There's a piece I read somewhere today that the only prominent person that's defending the Democrats in this filibuster issue is Orrin Hatch, the Republican. And basically what he's arguing for is the value of the filibuster and the value of the rules of order and procedure in the Senate. And that he's kind of the last bastion of any chance at all that the Republicans have. And the article suggests that if they lose the filibuster, they don't even need to bother to come to work in the morning because they're out of business, you know?
Right. Yeah.
That all they've got right now is the filibuster. And when they lose that, they're not going to have anything. I mean, there's no reason for them to even be there.
You know, but a lot of us that consider ourselves Democratic supporters, you know, or you know, in that coalition, going back before the Barack Obama days, I mean, like they used the Republicans used to make unprecedented use of the filibuster even back then. Again, I'm an Oklahoma voter. James Inhofe was called Dr. No, or was it Coburn? Coburn or Inhofe, I can't remember which one. I think it was called Dr. No because he actually single-handedly, over 300 instances, you know, did his what was it, a secret hold kind of thing to prevent legislation, and that was prior to Obama. Yeah. But for some reason you didn't hear that, and again, this is part of the problem that we don't have a media, you know, that actually reports. I mean, it is. We're starting to finally see some comprehension, you know, at least in CNN and places like that you really the Republicans are not your friends. Yeah. And who knows, maybe they'll go somewhere, but you know, it's way too late, and it's not that much to hang your hat on. Yeah.
I guess where I was coming from is familiarity with the framers and the fact that the system they designed requires a totally different way of behavior. And right. And you know, and that's what really bothers me. I think that somehow we've got to find a way to return to some semblance of that. Now, whether it's the Democrats that can bring it back, or I don't know who, but somehow it's got to happen, or the Republic as it's put together is going to be changed. I mean, you know, we may end up with some sort of a multi-party system. That may be in the offering. I can remember when I was in college in the 70s and early 80s that people were seriously talking about the advantages of a multi-party system as opposed to the two-party system. But the two-party system was so strongly entrenched here that I can remember when I was in college, I went to school in Boston, and but I mean, talk about Democratic Party control. My God, I mean, throughout the city, you know, right through the city. And I took a class in political parties in college from a guy who was a representative in the state legislature, a Democratic representative, and he told us in this class one time that that straight party voting was the only way to go. That ultimately, you know, these people that claim that they vote the man, not the party, are dangerous enemies to this political system. That if democracy can really work in this country, more and more people have to vote straight Democrat, right up and down the line. The only thing that counted was not their personality, their character, their education, their experience, nothing. It was that D after their name. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
The funny thing about that is, though, is like I have actually I didn't start out this way, but I have become a straight party voter simply because of the absolute utter discipline that Republicans vote for when they're in power.
So have I.
They don't have any individuality. They actually serve as a block, and they force a situation where you're either for that or you're against it. Right. You know, and I've had, oh God, how many arguments have I had with you know, left-leaning types, progressives of all stripes, you know, heading into the election 2000. I mean, I saw it coming, sort of, in a lot of ways. I had a lot of arguments with Jill Stein and Green Party types, like back in the early, you know, like January, February 2016. Like I could see where this was heading. Like, you guys are not, you're gonna vote a third party candidate that has no prayer of winning, and you're going to siphon votes away from, you know, the only alternative to what's going to happen. Yeah. And, you know, I was exhausted by October. I mean, by that point, that's when I stopped actually having these conversations with people, because at that point it was like, well, they're going to do what they're going to do. Yep. And there's no way you can change that. But really, that's it. The Republicans and their voters vote with something near unanimity when it comes to anything. It does not matter what the situation, it doesn't matter what the facts. This is what we're seeing now with the Trump administration as in power. All the things that were important to them suddenly aren't that important anymore. Like, Trump and his entire administration used private email servers. Suddenly, this is not an issue. That was a really big deal before. Yep. But whatever.
That's right. That's right.
And that's just like one example. But so yeah, I'm a straight party voter now, in those terms because
that's the only way to function in this system now.
And we're not going to get to a multi-party system short of an actual constitutional amendment.
No.
You can't do it. And as you pointed out many times, opening the amendment process now is opening Pandora's box. This is exactly the wrong time to do it. It's the ultimate paradox. We've never needed it more. But at the same time, it's never been more dangerous to attempt it.
It's never been more dangerous to try it now. Exactly right. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I've been thinking when you were talking about your becoming a one-party voter, I was thinking over the last couple of weeks, as these Trump nominees were passing, and especially Betsy DeVos, when she was approved, confirmed by the vice president's vote in the Senate. I was waiting. We here in West Virginia were hoping that our Republican capital would. I mean, she got thousands of calls, on DeVos. And the irony is, my wife gets her newsletter. She has a regular newsletter that comes out, and she got the newsletter over the weekend. And Capitol never mentioned the controversy over Betsy DeVos. Never mentioned the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails she was getting against Betsy DeVos and urging her to be the Republican who stood up and cost Betsy DeVos the nomination as education secretary. She not only didn't she do it, but in her newsletter she never even mentioned that it happened.
Right.
And I mean, in a state with less than 2 million people, the number of calls and emails she got was astounding. I mean, it was significant
sure,
if you put it in context. And I can remember, I honestly didn't think that she would, but the people that I was thinking would be like McCain, somebody like McCain or Lindsey Graham or somebody like that. And They didn't, they come out against Trump all the time, raise questions, but they still vote straight,
Right, and even Lindsey Graham is starting to he's starting to kind of retreat. It's clear that you can see that he's not getting any kind of any support where he wants it. So he's starting to try to find a way to curry favor back with whatever the party establishment is.
Yeah, he's he's attacking the Democrats. He's attacking Chuck Schumer, basically. And of course the main point of attack they use is that the Democrats still can't believe they lost.
Right.
They're still floundering around trying to recover from the election, and the nation needs to move on. Is what they're.
I have to say I'm genuinely curious, and I wish there was a way to actually study this somehow. I believe that there is a significant effect that within the margin of error of the actual election itself. I think a lot of people just looked at Clinton versus Trump and thought, no way he's going to win.
Yeah.
And just decided not to go vote. It's like, this is just ridiculous. This is a joke. I'm not going to go stand in line for 6 hours or 3 hours. It just, she's going to win, no problem. But I think, I could easily see 2 million votes right there. Just people thinking it's just not possible.
No, you're right.
But that's a hypothetical that can never be proven one way or the other. And now we got what we got.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one of the articles I've got that in this, I'm a little bit skittish about dealing with this, and I don't know whether Bob has or not. I haven't been listening to Bob the last couple of weeks, but I don't know whether he's touched on this or not. It's the mental state of the president. There's some evidence coming out now that there's serious question. The question is being raised by pretty reputable people about. Well, a lot of people talk about the president's temperament, but now it's becoming a little bit clearer that by temperament they mean something more than his tendency to fly off the handle.
Right, outright, questioning his actual sanity as such.
Yeah. I mean, they really. I mean, and there's one. I got an article. I've had it for a week or so, from groups of psychologists, prominent psychologists. One of them from Johns Hopkins, who were raising serious questions about the level of narcissism that he's demonstrating, and the fact that this borders on psychotic, and to some of these people, and they're really concerned, and they're reluctant to say anything in public because that I don't know, this is history, but in '64 there was a lot of talk about whether in fact Barry Goldwater was mentally disturbed. There were a number of psychologists that came out and argued that he was a threat to the nation, that he could really start World War III because he was a little bit unbalanced when it came to nuclear weapons and all this other stuff.
In your gut, he's nuts.
And the result of that was that they came up with something called the Goldwater rule, and basically it is that psychologists, people in the business of psychology, and you do not throw out diagnoses of people that you haven't had the opportunity to personally examine.
Well, that's interesting. I knew that was a point of professional ethics, but I didn't know that was directly tied to Goldwater.
It came from that, yeah. Huh. And that's when they adopted it. And so these people have been very reluctant to say anything, but now as we move, into the administration a little bit, there's more and more of them talking about it. And this weekend, I picked up the fact that Bernie Sanders yesterday on Meet the Press referred to President Trump as delusional,
right,
and a pathological liar, he called him. And Chuck Todd reacted to that, and he said, that's pretty strong stuff, And Bernie said, what else can you say about somebody that continues to insist that 3 to 5 million voters voted illegally when there's not one piece of evidence to indicate that's true,
And the only way to back up your assertion is to call into question the entire business of gathering data and facts in the first place.
Right.
I mean, what else do you call it? I sympathize. It is incendiary language, but at the same time, we are way through the looking glass at this point.
Yeah, and yesterday Stephen Miller was the White House guy. He appeared on he appeared on 4 of the talk shows yesterday. And he basically talked about busloads of people from Massachusetts going down
to New Hampshire.
Going into New Hampshire, yeah.
Of course, because that's what you do when you're in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people in Massachusetts that go to New Hampshire to buy alcohol and cigarettes because the taxes are less,
But pack your pen.
But that doesn't mean they vote there, I mean, and but anyway. So he's basically putting out the same argument, and it's still the official line, and so but
it's the official line.
Yeah,
it's the official line. Isn't that astounding just by itself? But
that's exactly what you were talking about. They're all supposed to abide by it, but Al Franken on Friday night on Bill Maher's program, Al Franken talked about the fact that there are some serious questions being raised in Washington about whether the president's mental state is, and he said whether he's right in the head or something.
Yeah.
And then yesterday on CNN, he made the same point. He said, behind closed doors, some Republican senators are really beginning to talk about the president's mental state. And so, that caused me to go back and pull this article that I've been sitting on for weeks because I don't want to be the one that's putting out there this kind of stuff. But in fact, I talked to my wife about it, and she said, well, you've got to be careful where it comes from. You can't get it from some rag that you've got to, if there are reputable psychiatrists saying this. Well, I said, well, one of the guys quoted that I've got is Johns Hopkins. And she said, well, that's pretty serious, so. Well,
but and at the same time, it's like in our intelligence services, this is a practice going back decades. We have psychologists and psychiatrists who observe like foreign leaders and try to craft psychological profiles of them to make a sense of predictable patterns of what they're going to do this or that way, at least for rational actors. And I'm sure, North Korea has got like a whole panel of people studying like whatever leader happens to be in position at the time. So, famously, one of those professionals that worked for the intelligence wrote an entire book on George W. Bush, back in the probably about 2003 or 4 or something like that, called Bush on the Couch,
right? Where
he'd taken what he had been taught, to do distance diagnoses on political leaders. He turned his attention on Bush and wrote an entire book about it. So it's not as though this is entirely unfounded or it's just out of nowhere or like armchair psychology or psychiatry or something like that.
Yeah.
Or Dennis Hastert looking at a video and saying Terry Schiavo is awake and fine and doing well. It's not that kind of pseudoscience. There is actual, there's, for all I know, reading, diagnosing handwriting may actually have some benefit too, but this is not even that tenuous. This is actually based on direct observations of speech patterns, known history, and all kinds of behavioral things that are in common with certain kinds of conditions. Yeah. And narcissism is not that hard to peg, for one thing.
No, well, he just provides all sorts of material.
Oh, God.
God Almighty. So
right.
Let me ask you if you don't mind, and if you don't want to deal with this, don't. But
no, go ahead, shoot.
What do you think? What do you think ultimately is going to happen? I mean, are you one of these people that buys in? I got an article that I pulled late last week by Kathleen Parker, and she predicts that Trump won't make 2 years. She claims that he'll either be impeached or something within 2 years, that he won't even make 2 years. In fact, the title of her article is "A 2-Year Presidency." And I posted a little bit on Facebook about it because Kathleen Parker is not somebody that I would expect to write this. I enjoy reading her stuff, but she's usually very moderate. I mean, usually she doesn't say anything that's too outrageous,
No, I know. I follow a couple of trusted sources, middle of the road types, that have kind of been, saying that the shelf life on this presidency is got to be down to the weeks or something like that. And me personally, my reflection is as long, for one thing, whatever you want to say about Trump, he's a survivor of some sort.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the establishment Republican Party, as far as I can tell, I mean, like aside from the occasional embarrassment, he's exactly the guy that they've been waiting to come and take the helm. I mean, like you think of Grover Norquist's famous, manifesto from years back. Just give us, an executive with enough working digits to operate a pen to sign our legislation, and we don't care what he does. We want a figurehead who's going to back up, our legislative agenda, and he is certainly doing that. I mean, like he hasn't done anything to break party ranks, whether it's nominating Supreme Court justices or cabinet. God, there's no question there.
Yeah,
I mean, so. And apparently, whatever scandal comes his way, whatever stupid or embarrassing or just bizarre thing that he does in public life, it doesn't. He's apparently unsinkable. Reagan was the original Teflon president. He's got nothing on this guy.
No, I agree with you 100% on that one. I've even said that myself. So I mean, I have a hard time imagining what he could do. Unless his sense of a narcissistic, grandeur, inflates him so much that he actually falls out of favor with the Republican establishment. But as long as, like I said, he's got a survival instinct. If he ever finds that he's like slipping out of favor, I think he's probably going to correct his course and get back into whatever he needs to do. And as long as he stays right with the GOP establishment, they're not going to take him out. Why would they? No,
because he's crazy, because he's weird, because he makes a laughing stock out of the country, or that everybody hates him. No, the Republicans don't care about that.
Right.
As long as their power remains unchallenged and is more or less in place, they're going to put up with anything because they can deal with that. they just. So I don't see it happening. I really don't, unless he really takes a swing for the bizarre. He can maintain course. He's already relatively bizarre, but we've already come to internalize and process a lot of this stuff is like, if not normal, at least expected. If he maintains course more or less as he has been, he can ride out the next 2 years. Who's going to take him down? I mean, like we the last time we spoke, in fact, I said, it's as far as like the emoluments and all that stuff, it's a question of catch me if you can. If you want to stop me in my law breaking, then step up and do it. Put the cuffs on me. But no one's willing to do that. And they're going to commit outrage after outrage after outrage precisely because nobody's prepared to act. Nobody ever imagined anybody would actually cross these lines. And when somebody does, they're completely unprepared to prosecute it. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do if you want to serve a subpoena to Dick Cheney and he threatens to arrest the court officer, from Capitol Security when they try to come in the door?
Yeah.
You do nothing. And that was a small thing, from 12 years ago.
Right.
And now we're in the we're in the post-truth era.
Yeah.
Okay then. Woo, game on.
Yeah. the way you put it, but I've been looking at it from the perspective of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, and I don't see either one of those guys. I mean, they're totally silent.
Well, Paul Ryan, this is the best thing. It's like he just won 3 lotteries simultaneously. This is his big chance to do all the things he's always wanted. He wants to take down Social Security and Medicare and all these things, and he's got a legitimate shot now. It could really happen.
Yeah,
and it could happen in the next year and a half, and I don't see anything stopping that. I don't even know. Even if the Democrats suddenly, and there's some indications that people are starting to get a sense of what's at stake, but we're so far out of power at this point. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree. I do agree. I think, again, we were talking earlier about the filibuster being about the last thing left.
No, and it's gone. It'll be gone in a couple of weeks.
They have the power. I mean, they obviously have the power, and so the only chance that the filibuster has is if Republicans really believe that it's too dangerous to take it down.
No, the only chance the filibuster has is if the Democrats don't use it.
Yeah.
If they attempt to use it, it's gone. And the very first time the Democrats actually inconvenience the Republicans with a use of the filibuster, they will take it away. And we've known this. We knew this back in the Obama days. Like those of us who paid attention, we knew that it was ridiculous. Letting the but it's a Cassandra complex. That's basically what it is. That's what it means to be
it's the only place that majority rule didn't work. I mean, you needed more than a majority. You needed a supermajority, and I mean, eventually it's got to fall, and this is the time. And I think you're right. I think that right now the Republican establishment has an opportunity to do all the things that it never really thought it could ever do, and they're going to take advantage of it because they may never get it again. Although I don't know.
Even if there are consequences at this point, the gains that they stand to make are so grand and so monumental, they can afford. I mean, if I'm in their position, I'd say just take it, And if the public decides to punish us later, well, they'll never undo the damage that we can do right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the work of generations and decades upon decades to build a house of cards. But man, to take it down, it takes seconds, and that's where they are right now. They have the power to do it.
No.
Anyway, that's my take. Tell you what, Dr. Bill, you're coming up against the top of the hour, so I'm going to back out of here.
All right, buddy. Hey, listen, thank you so much. This was great.
It's so good to talk to you again.
It's so good. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye now.
All right.
Be safe. Be safe. Wow, that's a wonderful hour, and I appreciate that insight so much. So anyway, what a way to close out the first program that we've had, live program we've had in a week, is for Horst to share close to an hour with us. I really do appreciate that. We've got a beautiful day here in Appalachia. I hope that your weather is good where you are. I did pick up word earlier that the snowstorm that's hitting New England is not quite as severe as they thought it might be. It's still bad, but and flooding in California, there's a dangerous threat there. So I feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about how beautiful our weather is today, but this is an absolutely desirable kind of February day. The sun's shining, the sky's blue. It's just beautiful here. I've really enjoyed today. I hope that you found it informative and valuable, and that you'll spread the word around to other folks, and hopefully we can build our base a little bit as the weeks go on. In the meantime, I want to remind you that tomorrow is Tuesday. We will be beginning our program 30 minutes later than today. In the Eastern time, be 1:30 tomorrow. We'll be on the air for 90 minutes of live broadcasting. I do invite you to join us, and I want to thank you for today, for your willingness to tune in. I invite you to do the same tomorrow and Wednesday as well. For the Virtual Center and for Bob Kincaid and Agnes and the folks at Head On Radio Network, thank you so very, very much for the opportunity to be with you live today here at the Virtual Center. I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Be kind to each other. Enjoy it, and hopefully we can get back together again tomorrow. And again, if you do think of things that you would like to share or reactions that you would like to make to comments that Horst made or comments that I made, we would love to hear from you, and you'll have the opportunity to do that tomorrow. So again, this is Bill O'Brien for the Virtual Center, thanking you, hoping you have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.